Hello, Mrs. Watson.
Hello?
You know, I know you don't know me, but there's a man that you may know that I'm familiar with. You know Leonard Gaskell and his wife Louise. He was the postmaster.
Oh, yes, yes. I know right where they lived.
He was from my hometown in Pennsylvania. Very interesting because he was the mayor of Southport as well as being the postmaster for 10 years.
Ah, okay.
That was from 1935 to 1945. He was the postmaster.
Well, and I moved to Southport in 1937.
Right.
Now, how old were you when you moved to Southport?
I had just turned 19.
19. Okay. And what do you remember from when you first moved there?
Well, the most important thing, I guess, the movers had brought the furniture and were in front of the house, the parsonage. And I looked up, and here came across the park this good-looking young man. And that was in 1937, and we were married in 1940.
Goodness. So it was love at first sight, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't even tell you what he had, what he wore.
Really?
And that was D.I. Watson, the grandson of Dr. Watson.
What did he do? Your husband? What was his job back then?
He was an assistant county auditor.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Well, at the time I met him, the jobs were scarce, and he had several jobs, but he was fortunate enough to go to business school in Charleston.
Oh.
And had a job waiting for him at the courthouse as assistant county auditor. So he was there about 2 years before he had to go in the military.
So then you got married in 1940.
And we were married in 1940. And in 1942, he had to go in the military.
He was drafted.
Yes.
Did you worry? Did you think he was going to be drafted, or did you think maybe he would stay home?
Well, we always hoped for the best. And before it was over with, I guess he was in the best. He was placed in the Army Air Corps, and he really got an education. He had to learn to wire an airplane from the nose to the tail. But the interesting thing to me, they sent him to Miami, then to Amarillo, Texas, then to Ohio, and then they sent him to Angel Island, right near the Golden Gate Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 11 of the boys, and I have their names and all. But they put them on. They were their orders, and I have their orders, a copy of their orders. They were scheduled to go to Hawaii, and they put them on the wrong ship. And it was just a small merchant ship, I guess. And when they finally found a place to land them, it was New Caledonia. When they got there, nobody knew who they were. They had no orders. So they had to just hang around there until they could find out where they were supposed to go.
Goodness.
It was rough. Well, it was 6 weeks that I didn't know where it was.
Oh no, that must have been very hard.
And Miss Grace Ruark was with the Red Cross. And I went to see her and I said, Miss Grace, DI's been gone 6 weeks and I haven't heard a word. She said, oh, we'll get on it. And in less than a day, we heard from him.
Oh,
But he didn't know where he was supposed to be. Anyway, he wound up in New Guinea and stayed. And while he was in New Guinea, he had to load airplanes on paper. They didn't have any computers at that time.
oh,
But they gave him a desk and said, load this plane. So he had to figure out how much weight to put in the tail, how much weight the plane had when it took off, and if there was enough gas for it to get back. And it was all a new experience for a bookkeeper from a small town. But actually, he got a good education working. But I did not know till after the war that he was in one of the most dangerous places in the Pacific.
really?
And I'm glad the Lord held that back from me, so I didn't have to worry about that. And one day, John Wayne walked in his office, stood there while I dropped his hat on the desk, and he went outside for something. And so I grabbed his hat, put it on, went outside and said, take my picture. So somebody took his picture with John Wayne's hat on. And we thought that was pretty cool.
So were you able to write back and forth quite a bit then? Send letters?
We wrote every day.
And she didn't keep them.
One day, he was in New Guinea at his desk, and the 2 men walked in the office, and they said, anybody want to go to the States? And of course they did. So they had to get ready to write fast flight. And the vice president of the Philippines was coming to the United States. And he brought 2 of the boys with him. And I didn't know anything about that till I got a telephone call from California saying I'm in the States.
Oh.
I can't tell you how I felt.
Oh.
It's been 2 years.
Mm.
Yeah, 2 years. But they stationed him at Hamilton Field, California, which is right across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Then how long was he in California?
Well, a year. When he got to California. My best friend's husband was being stationed out there. So we had
Was that Joe from Southport?
yeah,
Joe Stevens from Southport.
no,
Joe.
from Wilmington. She was my best friend in Southport, but she was living in Wilmington. Her husband was with the telephone company.
And what was her name?
What was her name? What was her maiden name, Mom?
Josephine Smith.
Josephine Smith in Southport.
From Southport. And so her husband was in California too?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you something that I think was interesting to me. He was among those in the school they sent him to in Chicago, I believe. And he was at the top of his class. So they said, you can have your choice of where you want to be stationed. Well, he knew that D.I. and I were near San Francisco. He'd never been out there. But he knew Josephine and I were good friends. So that's where he asked to be sent. And that's where they sent him.
Oh, what a good man. Now, how did you get out to California? How did you travel out there?
Well, to get to California, first, my sister, my youngest sister, her husband was stationed out in the same area. And she came to me and said, Myrtle, I'm going to California tomorrow. You can go with me if you want to, but I'm going. Well, I wasn't going to let her leave me. So we got ready overnight, caught a bus to Supply, and from there to Charleston. And I don't know whether I'm supposed to tell this or not.
Of course.
But the military bus was full. And the two boys, young military boys, came up to us and said, where are you going? And we told them. And they said, are your husbands out there? And we said, yes. Well, they said, well, you come on and get in line and be our wives, and we'll get you on that bus.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So
They pretended for you.
So, well, it took 6 days and 7 nights to get from Southport to San Francisco.
Wow.
So did the bus traveled all night as well? Were you on the bus 24 hours a day?
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
A whole week. So we would just stop at restaurants to eat?
We just, they stopped at different airports to gas up, and
You mean bus stations or airports?
airports.
Okay.
We were on an airplane. We were under the Air Corps then.
Well, tell them who your sister was married to, Mom.
My sister was married to Billy Willis from Southport.
Okay.
And so anyway, that's why she was going out there and why I got to go.
Did you know when you started that it was going to take you a week to get there?
No. That didn't matter. We were on our way.
Yeah. Oh, what an adventure. That would make a great movie. The the story of you and your sister traveling across country to see your
A
husband.
movie, Mom, a movie. At the Amuse You.
It's like a movie.
Yeah,
And then you were in California. So what did you do in Southport when your husband was away in the military during the war? What did you do back in Southport? How did you keep yourself busy?
well, I was working at the county agent's office, but they let me take his job, my husband's job, at the courthouse till the war was over. He could come home. So I worked in the auditor's office where he was working. But there was one. I'm not a bookkeeper, but I had to be one. So one book I remember was so hard for a person who was not a bookkeeper, and he got so tired, I guess, of teaching me. He looked at me. He said, "If you weren't my wife, I'd walk out of here and let you figure it out for yourself."
Oh, was that Daddy? Oh, before he left.
Just before he left.
Well, when he left, did you not work out at the surveying place, or that was while you were married? When you worked out at the...
I worked for at the Farm Bureau.
Surveyors.
That's when we had maps and you had to measure land on the maps. And it was called the,
That's okay.
AAA office.
Was that located in Lockwood Folly?
Yes, where the Methodist church is, when you come off the bridge, at Supply, Elvis Valley River, well, the building was right in front of that church, but it was an old farm building. I don't know what to call it, but we had no electricity. So if it turned dark, we just have to sit and wait till it got light and light enough to work. Had one telephone that might have been the only one at Supply. And Mr. J.E. Dodson was county agent and one of the best men, one of the best bosses anybody could ever have. So if any of his children are around, I want them to know that we highly respected him and loved him too. And I worked there until I went to California that year. Down at Supply.
So first you worked at the courthouse and then you worked at the surveyor's office?
No, I went to work at the surveyor's office. And then when my husband had to go in the military, I left that job at Supply and took his job in the office in Southport.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, and then when he knew he was going to go, that's when he started training you to do the bookkeeping job? He knew he was going to be drafted?
Oh, yeah. Well, he knew. He had 2 weeks, I think, to get ready.
To train.
And so he had to train you that quickly, huh?
He just trained somebody else to after they found out I don't know. It's been a long time ago.
That's okay.
But Ressie Watley, if any of you remember her, she took the job and worked there until she retired.
Now, did you volunteer with the Red Cross during the war?
In the Masonic Hall, we rolled bandages.
Rolled bandages? Uh-huh.
Dr. Dozier's wife was one of the ones that I remember there. Oh, I guess about 10 of us. I guess we met every night and rolled bandages
Yeah.
with the Red Cross. And we had a good time
Yeah,
doing
you probably talked and stuff, right?
gossip, whatever what you want. But the hardest thing for me, our house was on the street just a block from the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would get off work in the afternoon, I'd walk through the park, get to my front door, and burst into tears.
Oh.
But we had a small apartment upstairs that we rented, and there were two couples that stayed, or the girls stayed up there, and their husbands were stationed at Coast Guard Station. But they were so nice to me. They soon learned that my routine. So they were at my front door to meet me when I got home from work. And that was a big help.
So you didn't have to come home to an empty house. Yeah.
It was tough. But the nice thing, there wasn't a boy, girl, not a person from Southport lost their lives during the war.
There was one buried in the cemetery, though, Mom. Who was that?
He was a foreigner that was killed. His ship was blown up outside Southport, so they buried him there.
Do you remember when the John D. Gill got hit by the submarine? Do you remember that?
Was that his ship that got hit by a submarine?
Yeah.
The merchant ship, the John D. Gill, it got hit by a submarine right off of Southport.
There's a little memorial down on the waterfront. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. Do you remember when that happened?
Oh, yes.
What do you remember?
The ones that survived came up with black oil on them.
It was an oil tanker, Linda. That's why they.
It was. And we didn't really have blackouts in Southport except partial. But we had people on the watch.
So there was not full blackouts, huh?
Did you know there was a spy in Southport?
There was a what?
A German spy in Southport?
No, I hadn't heard that story.
Okay, Mom.
Well, we both
You can tell now.
several people knew they were spies. And I asked my dad one day, I said, well, you know he's there. Why don't you do something about it? He said, we have bigger fish to catch us or something in that order, because they were picking up his mail, and the few that knew it, I didn't know that, and my dad knew it, and but he didn't tell me anything till we had moved from Southport.
Goodness. Do you know the name of the person? The spy?
They were German spies.
Did you know their names? She had a wedding shower for somebody, for Watson. Isn't she the one that
the
had
spy woman. Yes.
Spy woman held a baby shower?
Lot of people thought they were, but you know how it is. But no, they didn't know she was a spy. She worked her way into society, if you want to call it that. And anyway, when she had a shower for Lib Watson, Di's cousin, and Lib, of course, gave her the list. And when I got to the door, she looked at me with her nose in the air, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Because Elizabeth is family, and she asked me to come." Well, nothing else was said.
Wow.
You're bringing back a lot of memories.
You don't remember her name, the woman?
The spy.
Yeah.
Spy.
No,
I don't remember her. If we think of it, I'll text you, Liz.
Yeah, it might come to you later.
That would be fun, Mom.
I don't know. I guess I knew her name.
We might have a write-up on Elizabeth's wedding or one of the parties.
Came with her a lot of weddings?
Well, but I know there were 2 showers for Lib Watson. And there wasn't. You just went around laughing and trying to. But as I said, my parents lived just a block in front of us. And my brother had I believe it's an English shepherd, but it was a small dog. And Jimmy Pravat had ordered it for his mother, and she didn't want it, so he gave it to my brother. And that dog, Nero, I would leave Mother and Dad to walk that block through the park at night, and Nero walked right there with me. He lay down in front of my bedroom window. He knew which one it was. And the next morning, when he saw me stirring, he got up, stretched himself, and walked back over to Daddy's house. But that dog, I guess he would have jumped anybody that touched me.
Aw.
But he was a nice dog. Belonged to my brother.
Now, were you friends with the Hardys?
Oh, yes, the Hardys. Dot and Lou.
What Dot and Lou were my husband's cousins.
Okay.
And Dot and I were very good friends. And I did them well.
Uh-huh.
And I've read the books that young Lou. Have you read his books?
Yes, yes, they're very good. Do you like them?
Well, I know the people he's talking about.
Uh-huh.
Some are funny and some are not so funny.
Uh-huh.
But Louis, Mr. Hardy, you'd go down to the waterfront, you wouldn't know who he was because he was a worker. And one of the things that his son put in a book he wrote. Some big shot men came to Southport, and they asked for Louis Hardy, and somebody said, no, so there he is over there. They said, no, that's not the Louis Hardy we're talking about. This is one that owns the shrimp boats. And they said, yeah, that's who it is. Over there mending those nets.
Oh.
Louis was a smart man, and he knew how to do a lot of things, and he was not an idle man. He worked. He had 6 or 7 shrimp boats in Southport, and the shrimp business was the main business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now, did he help you? He helped you get home one time? There's some story about that?
When D.I. was mustered out, we were in San Francisco, and they had to send him down to Marchfield, which is near Los Angeles. So I had to catch a ride on a train and meet him down there, which I did. And a couple, the first couple that operated the USO hut in Southport, lived on they were very active in our church. Both of them had beautiful voices. But anyway, they lived on my way to Marchfield and asked me to spend the night with them. So that was a nice break for me.
Do you remember their names?
Coop Rider.
what was it?
COOPRIDER.
Cook Rider.
Coop Rider.
Super. Okay.
Are they from Southport?
Oh no, they
Oh,
were
no.
from California.
Oh, from California.
They were in your church in California.
No, the church they were in. I sang in the choir with them.
Which church?
Our church.
In Southport?
Yeah, they attended our church while they were there
In Southport.
in Southport.
And they were involved with the USO, you said, in Southport?
Yeah, he was with the Salvation Army.
The Salvation Army, because it was
And
originally.
then at that time, they were the ones that were staffing some of the USOs.
Okay.
And
Well, Mom, didn't Dot and Lewis bring you and Daddy home?
yes, they were cousins of my husband's family, and they had stopped in Biloxi, Mississippi, to visit somebody. And so we stopped by there to see, spend the night with D.I.'s sister, who was living in Biloxi. And we told him that we were going to spend the night with Jen, and then we were going to catch a train and go on to Wilmington. Well, Louis Hardy had a heart of gold. I heard him say to his wife, Dot, these children will never get a ride out of here this near Christmas. He said, let's take them with us. He had a 2-seated Chevrolet. In the back seat, I don't think anybody but me remembers it. But in the back seat, under the window, the back window, it was wide enough for a bed. So Louis fixed Dot a bed in that window and the two boys on the seat in the car. And I rode from Biloxi, Mississippi to Southport, sitting between the driver and my husband. And the only time you got to stop was if we had to gas up. You didn't have time to go in and get anything to eat.
Lois was going to get you home. Well, wasn't Dot pregnant?
We didn't know that till weeks later.
Okay.
So she was laying down in the window.
So she had a bed in the window.
In the window, and then the boy sat in the back, and
I
you were
see.
crammed in the middle. Goodness.
I tell you, Dot and Louis Hardy were really friends to us. And Dot was kin to my husband, but they
came to my wedding.
They were friends. We were friends. And Louis was a friend who would be a friend to him. Well, I can't go into all that, but he was a good, and you know, this was funny to me. You can imagine somebody owning 6 or 8 fleet shrimp boats and dressing like he didn't have 5 cents. And he would go to the,
Ford?
the store, like they have on the beaches, and buy for about 10 cents a dozen shirts, and bring them.
Where did he go to shop?
There's
Secondhand shop?
Yeah.
Oh.
he'd buy up several,
For 10 cents.
and
Well, for shrimping.
no, to bring home to give away.
Oh.
They were such a bargain. He wanted to share. He didn't charge anybody anything.
Did you go to the beach very often?
No, because there's not a very good road.
Or the road was bad?
And there were many people had cars. That was in 1940. And it was just a sand road from Southport to the beach. But there are people that had cottages over there, and they were building in 1940, they were building up the beach. So I didn't go very often because I didn't have a car, and Di didn't have a car, and it was almost a one-way street, and it had the bridge was what kind of
A drawbridge? The drawbridge?
no, but when the tide was in,
Floating.
it was a floating bridge, right?
Fine.
When the tide was right, you went over on it. So, and during that time, the government put Fort Castle up for sale. Nobody wanted it. So one Jimmy Brevad in our church said that's a valuable piece of property. He was an attorney, And I think the Baptist paid maybe $90,000 for it. And it was worth millions,
Oh,
but nobody wanted it. But you could hear somebody every once in a while say, well, the Baptists got it. They didn't like it. And they thought it ought to be shared with everybody. Well, it was. It still is. But it belongs to Southern Baptist.
Did you ever go over to Fort Caswell when it was a military base? Did you ever visit it?
Or Fort Caswell.
Or before?
This time, right after the war.
Oh, after.
It was just the remains.
oh, Civil War, right?
And after the Baptist bought it, Rick Holbrook, no, Fred Smith, started a summer camp for young people.
Mhm.
And then when he retired, Rick Holbrook was there for years. And he really made the place what it is today.
Mhm.
He was wonderful. Redid the buildings. Well, I can't go into all that, but Rick did a wonderful job.
Great.
And Rick lives
Go ahead.
now.
Do you remember going to the Amuse You?
Oh, my land. This is when we're recording. Dee had to get a quarter, usually from his aunt. He'd get a quarter. We go to the window to get the tickets. And we paid, I said, it was a nickel. Oh, well, a quarter we could both get in. That would be 2 dimes. And then we take the other nickel and buy about a bag of peanuts. But I'd like to say this, Mr. Price Furpress owned and operated. He never allowed a dirty movie to be shown. And he was a good Christian man. And all the movies were good. And if there were parents who didn't want their children to go to movies, they didn't need to worry in Southport, because you would get a good movie and a good environment. And I think Mr. Price Furpress' daughter-in-law might still be pianist at the Methodist Church. I'm not sure. Well, she wasn't then, she was too young. But
I have another question about, did you go to Leggett's drugstore?
when we were there, it still was a drugstore, but it was more of a soda shop. It was right across the street from Watson's Pharmacy. But it was a sort of a hangout place for children after school. But it was a nice place. It was a very nice place.
Did you ever go to Mr. McKenzie's ice cream shop?
I didn't, but my husband did a lot. Listen, this is one thing I remember so much about Southport. When we moved there in 1937, it was a new experience for me. I had come from a part of the state that was, what do you call it?
Oh, racist?
Racist, very racist. And when we moved to Southport, here was a white family living next to a black family. You never heard anybody criticize. I mean, it was just one big happy family. Of course, there was still that, living in the South, that had to be something. But it was the most core, it was the friendliest town I'd ever been in, for blacks and whites. You never heard anybody criticize them. There were 5 black churches by choice.
Mm-hmm.
When we had, I guess, 5 or 6 black members of Southport Baptist Church. We had some, and see, where I came from, that would never have happened.
Mm.
So it was Southport was one of a kind, I'd say. It was different from where I had been living all my life. And I appreciated the fact that you could live together side by side.
And didn't everybody, I remember you saying everybody had nicknames. Did you know that, Liz or Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's astounding. Now, did you have a nickname, or
I think it was
when
mostly
you moved here as a teenager, you didn't get a nickname?
Dot Hardy had,
oh yeah, sweetheart.
she was sweetheart, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, her husband called her sweetheart, so her boys called her sweetheart.
Oh, cute.
So everybody in the neighborhood called her sweetheart, and she was a sweetheart. She was good to everybody.
Did you or your sisters have nicknames?
Did Aunt Lou or Aunt Martha or any of you did you have nicknames? But of course you didn't grow up there, so maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
What?
You have to grow up here to have a nickname, huh?
Did Gus Swan or Uncle Bill have nicknames?
Well, Gus was his name was Augustus.
Oh.
He,
I might have that wrong, Liz. I just thought they had nicknames. I think like a lot of people in Southport have nicknames.
Yeah. A lot of
Right,
people.
right, they did have nicknames. But it was younger.
No, you've known about knee-high.
Knee-high, right. Did you know knee-high?
Say again.
I asked if she knew knee-high.
Did you know Knee-high? Did you know Knee-high? Did you know him?
Knee-high. Well, yes and no. The street he came from work on came right in front of the Baptist church. So I saw him nearly every day.
Mm-hmm.
And the children, he loved the children. And sometimes he'd hold out his arm and let a child climb.
Now, did you know Captain Charlie or just Daddy knew Captain Charlie?
Oh, I knew the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
Linda, I'm thinking so we've been talking an hour.
I know, I'm
It's
amazed.
been wonderful. But I would rather stop before she gets to, before,
Okay,
get too tired.
okay,
And, but we'd be happy to talk again.
Okay.
If you know, because you may go away and think of some things that you meant to tell us and say, oh, I should have mentioned that, or maybe that story. And we would love to hear those stories, but I don't want you to get too tired.
well, the other thing, Liz, if you think of something you want to ask her, you can always text me and let us know. And if she's not, if she's not up to it, but I think she has really enjoyed this. I have.
I'm glad we have too. This is wonderful. Now, I know you said you don't have any letters, but do you have any photos from when she lived in Southport, or?
Well, I have one right here. I can send you. This would have been, but I think I have all of the way it was pictures. But this is
Hold it up a little bit.
yeah. This was
Uh-huh.
the courthouse, I guess, where my dad worked.
All right.
And,
Oh,
but
that's the side of the courthouse. Nice. Okay.
yes, and I'm trying to think. The calendar on the wall was somebody with a Marilyn Monroe, I think, up there on the. Who was that, Mom, up there on the calendar?
Seems appropriate for a courthouse.
Oh gosh, but what kind of pictures would you like to see of Southport? Or most of mine are family pictures.
Family is good.
The doc, have you ever had a picture of Dr. Watson?
We have one picture of Dr. Watson that I'm
Okay.
aware of. That we use over and over
Okay.
again. Kind of
It's more
blurry.
a portrait than a.
Yeah, it's a portrait. We have a portrait of Dr. Watson.
Okay, that's probably the one we have. And also, I know when I read your article, which was wonderful, and I'm thinking, I went to the art museum many times. My dad went to school there, of course, and they had all this about Dr. Dozier. They'd never heard of Dr. Watson. They thought he was a pharmacist, but that's because when his sons died and he had the pharmacy, he went back to school. So I wanted to make sure that they didn't forget him.
Now you read the second article I sent you, right, about the
quarantine station.
well, the one
The other one I did, Mother told me, and I remembered that you had written that. I was
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you.
Very
And the
good.
pandemic, yes, that was great.
pandemic, right? And he called me and said, please don't travel between Wilmington and Southport. I mean, he was on it, and
Right.
and
Right.
Southport fared very well during that. And
And he lost 2 sons.
he lost 2 sons, right? They fared very well in 1918, and you said they died.
1920, George died. Yes, you're right.
It came back, you know.
Right, yeah.
But in that initial 1918
Right.
epidemic,
So,
he really fared pretty well. But then he lost
You
2
knew
sons
about
in
that,
1920.
yeah, he lost, Johnny and George.
Because he got it, I think he came down with it during 1918. He did, and
one?
everybody at the post office maybe, but survived.
Right,
Dr. Watson, I think,
okay.
got the flu.
And Dr. Watson put somebody's eyeball back in one time.
Yeah,
They're from over on Bald Head. Was that Captain Charlie?
that was Captain Charlie.
Oh, I've read that story in the book about Captain Charlie back.
Yes, yeah, we have that book. Yes, I said, oh my God, how can that be? It must have just been off center or something.
No, it was.
And kerosene,
It,
a kerosene patch.
oh, that's the best thing you can use. Kerosene. He didn't have to do much. He just pushed it back in place.
He just pushed it back. Oh my gosh. All right, well, I think my computer must be giving out. Can you hear us?
It was fading in and out, but this has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Watson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob.